Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Hello golfers, we're live and I'm joined here in not quite in the studio, in our own homes with Peter Knight. How are you, Peter?
I'm really well, thanks, Fitzy.
It's been a fairly good day out there.
We're as close as we can get, as we're allowed to be.
That's true. So
in fact, I think even with our we're on 5K limits for travel as far as except for a few exceptions, but I reckon we're right on the 5K limit where we both live, which is very unusual.
It's pretty close. I think if we went as the crow flies rather than the streets, it's going to be a bit different. But we are close. So I can see Bronwyn's here. So Bronwyn's a regular. So Bronwyn said hi down the bottom there. How are you, Bronwyn? How's life in country Victoria going at the moment? And what have you been up to today, Pete?
Doing a little bit of planning for a video course that I'm actually doing. And I know that you've done one on putting. So congratulations on getting that out and up and running. I'm going to do one. It's going to be called Breaking 100. Aside from that, I'm sort of keeping, mental health and physical health go together. So I've been spending a bit of time on the push bike over all of the time that we've been locked down.
Yeah, you've been a man possessed on that. Was it 9 days straight, you said?
9 days straight, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm up to a 34-day streak as well, but mine's 34 days of not being on the bike. So, well, it could be more than that too. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know who we are, I've been a golf pro for 37 years. I played on the Australian tour for a number of years. I then became a club pro, and for the last 11 years, I've been teaching at the Morat Public Golf Course and also in the last 18 months at Lang Lang. So really for the last probably 15 years, I've had a real passion for helping people lower their score and get better at golf. So that's why I started my YouTube channel in the first place. What's your background, Pete?
I got my membership card earlier this year, and I don't know whether it was a congratulatory note with it or a commiseratory note, but it was 40 years as a PGA member. In that time, I've worked at resorts in far north Queensland. I've spent a lot of time coaching at state and institute level now as well, both in New South Wales and also in Victoria, as well as coaching national teams for Australia, and also 5 years coaching in Taiwan. The last 10 years I've spent coaching at Yarra Bend Public Golf Course in Melbourne. And so I'm coaching players of, people who are just beginning in the game. I think the youngest client I've got at the moment is 5 years old, and the oldest is, he would be in his 80s. So everyone in between. And you know what? I'm enjoying coaching now at least as much, probably more than I ever have.
Yeah. No, isn't that great? And aren't we lucky in this sport that an 80-year-old can still play? So I know, my father's in his 80s and I can easily go out and play golf with Dad. There's not too many other sports that you could play where that could happen. And I think we're very lucky to have that.
And also for someone, an 80-year-old to have the attitude that there's some things that I think that I can do better. And with a lot of people, as we age, our bodies aren't as sturdy as what they once were. And so we have to make adaptive changes to those, whether that's just through illness or through injury or just through age, and having to be able to adapt and still play the game we love, which is, I think that's extraordinary too, that someone who would have that attitude, even though I've been injured, even though I'm old, even though, my body's not working like it used to, I still want to be able to play golf as well as what I possibly can.
Yeah. Now, you're also a master golf professional. So there's only 4 of those. How did you get to be a master golf professional? Were you just good at it?
No. Thankfully, it wasn't just playing tests against other tour players or something like that. The qualifying criteria was that we had to be a PGA member for a minimum of 20 years. We had to have been a level 3 AAA. So we have the different categories of coaches, and so level 3 AAA was the highest rating. We had to be a level 3 AAA coach for a minimum of 8 years. Then we had to do a study and report on that study. And what I did is a research project around the mental skills of elite players. You know, how they represent things like confidence to themselves. So that was quite interesting, actually.
That would have been. Yeah. And did you find that research helped you to coach better?
Definitely, because understanding what the questions that were put to players were, some of them were open-ended and some of them weren't. But particularly the open-ended ones were ones that weren't trying to prompt for an answer. And so we'd get sort of all sorts of different answers. And there were some things about how players represented confidence states or high performance states, which is really what we were looking for. There were some commonalities in those and there were some differences. And it is interesting when I'm coaching people and they're talking about, say, their lack of confidence in their own game and how that contrasts so dramatically to what I hear of players when they're performing really well.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, I've just got another comment up here. So David Lee from England, he's been out on the golf course and he's managed to race back to his home so he can follow the live stream. So let us know where you're viewing from. We know there are people out there viewing. We'd love to hear where you're from. It's always exciting. That's one of the best things about YouTube from my point of view. Do you find that, finding out where people are coming from, Pete?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, YouTube and online coaching and seeing, where your clients come from, you sort of have a look. And if they don't, particularly if it's footage that's coming to you, you look and think, wonder where that is in the world. And of course, eventually ask, and often your guess is way off the mark.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so practice. Is it any good? Should we do it? Or should we just not worry about it?
I reckon it was about the 1950s. Before that, there were golf courses didn't have driving ranges or practice fairways, sort of same thing. And then after that, they did start to have people practicing a little bit. And of course, now it's become such a huge part of the game. So people only got better by playing. And now it's so different in the way people approach practice. I remember reading a Harvey Penick book, and two of his most famous students were Tom Kite and Ben Crenshaw. And of Crenshaw, he said, I could never get him off the golf course and onto the practice fairway enough. He didn't get on the range enough. And of Kite, he said, I couldn't get him off the range and get him onto the golf course. And we're talking, both of them, won multiple major championships. So what's right? But certainly,
same coach.
Important.
Yeah, same coach, but two totally different personalities, different golf swings. And, I know a lot of people think that as coaches, we want everyone to look the same way. And nothing could be further from the truth. I would be embarrassed if someone could walk along a range and say, oh, you get lessons from Brian, you get lessons from Brian, because there's certainly no one way to swing. So that's probably a really good example of two totally different attitudes and players and how they practice. But that goes to any sport too, doesn't it?
It does, because we don't have the requirement of, particular types of physiology. So what I mean by that is, if you're a weightlifter or a gymnast, you need to have short limbs for leverage. If you're a marathon runner, you need to be light and have, really strong cardiovascular system. So there's none of that for golf. So we've got golfers, male and female, all different shapes and sizes, all different levels of fitness and approaches to fitness and how they go about playing. And we're seeing them compete in the final groups of tournaments every single week. And there's more differences than everything. The only thing that they have in common is the message they give the golf ball to make it go where they want it to go.
Yes. Yeah, as I heard someone say, the ball doesn't have eyes and ears; it just goes in the direction the club face tells it to.
It does,
or directs it to. Yeah,
it does.
Yes.
It obeys blindly.
That's it. So, what do you think good practice should look like?
Good practice has a number of components. One is that it certainly should have a goal, because the reason you practice is to try and make some sort of improvement, and ultimately that's a transfer to the golf course. But if we're talking specifically of technique for the moment, then it's about having a goal to try and improve a particular shot or a golf swing, and understanding that that is actually what you're doing. And you might be following up on advice that you were given from your coach. Ideally, you'll have a form of feedback or a way of measuring whether or not you're actually doing what it is that you're attempting to do. Now, that could be a particular feel. It could be looking in a mirror. It could be getting feedback from a mate. So you might be telling someone else, husband, wife, partner, or maybe that's not such a good idea. Comments have come back. But having some form of feedback. I would say definitely not practicing too much. And then also there's one thing that I call the rule of thirds. And so there's looking at practice and dividing it up into, one part of the rule of thirds is dividing it up into long game, short game, and putting. But the other part of the rule of thirds, in terms of how you go about practicing, is to practice the skill element or the technical element. So you're trying to improve something, even if that's just your grip or ensuring that your alignment's correct. Then, and remembering that we're also looking ultimately for a transfer to what you can do on the golf course, is having a building variety into it. And this starts to bridge your ability to get it to be able to perform on the golf course. So that'll be doing things like changing targets, changing clubs, changing shot shapes, changing swing speeds to try and build that skill. Because every time you play a shot, the swing is a little bit different, given how far the club travels, how complex the movement is from our body's perspective. What we're looking to do is to try and create a movement habit through repetition. But obviously it's got to be repetition that where you're actually focused on having, some sort of outcome. So that's the technical part. But then doing the skill component, and finally putting yourself under some form of competitive pressure. So it makes it very game-like. Now that could be literally having a competition on the range with a friend. It could be some ranges actually have equipment set up where you can measure the results of shots. So you might say take a block of 4 shots or 5 shots or something like that, and on a range aim between 2 targets and hit a club and say, I want to count how many out of 5 I get between this target. When you do that type of practice, it's good to record the practice so that you can monitor progress over time, because your progress is going to change from day to day. What we're looking for is a trend over time.
Sorry, just let me jump in there. I think that's a really good point. A lot of people don't actually record. They just hit shot after shot after shot, and they come away thinking that was good or that was bad. I think that probably we need to have an expectation of what we should be doing in the practice swing, have a plan, not a practice swing, in the practice session. What is it we're trying to achieve out of this?
Yeah, definitely.
How many shots am I going to hit?
Yeah. Yes.
They do it on their mobile phone and they send that note to their coach. And I think that's quite effective and underutilised. Now, we've just got a couple more comments in here. We've got Peter. So Peter's It doesn't go where I want it to go. You'll get there, Pete. I know you will. It's been a while since I saw you. He's a regular at Morak. We'll get there. I'll get you in the right direction when we get back out and play. Jeff Cohen, a regular to the YouTube channel and passionate golfer, down living around the Phillip Island these days. So that's good. And we've got Core here. Thanks, Peter and Brian, for tonight. That's our pleasure, Core. He's always a student of the game and comes to everything that I do. So good to see you here. Sorry I interrupted you there, Pete.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, so other forms of competition that you can do, actually, one thing I should say is when you're doing those, say, competitive stuff and even sometimes the skill stuff, is we're trying to build habits that we're taking to the golf course. So it's a good idea to use your normal shot routine. Now, the reason I call it a shot routine is because we look at, often it's called a pre-shot routine. And we just normally look at what a player does when they walk to the ball, mostly from standing behind it, how they go about setting up and then swinging the golf club. But there's a lot more to it than that. So prior to that, there's a process of club selection. So considering environmental elements, how far do you have to go, change of elevation, wind direction and strength, pin positions and all those sorts of things to determine ultimately which club are you going to use and what shot do I want to play. Then you'll create some form of representation of that shot. And we'll do this for every movement that we make. It's almost like we plan that move, even if it's like not even consciously. And it might take microseconds before we actually make a movement, unless it's purely reflexive. A golf swing is not purely reflexive. So we will create that movement. And so they're the things that you still want to practice and become good at, so they become much more automated. Because when you're standing on the first tee on a morning, other players around the tee, you're going to be nervous. I'm sure, Fitzy, you're nervous. I'm always nervous a little bit when I do that. And the nerves never go away. So it's a matter of accepting the fact that you're feeling that way, that you're feeling a little bit nervous, and then dealing with it. And the more you are making a habitual movement, so habitual movement includes your whole routine, as well as the last part of that routine, which is actually just the swinging of the golf club. So practice that as well. That should be into your practice. When you do that, it's going to drastically reduce the number of shots that you hit in a given time period. So let's say you had one ball to practice with. This is your total practice session, one shot. Consider how much importance you place on that one ball, how many practice swings you'd be checking and monitoring that your movement's good, because you're so set on trying to hit a really good shot. So that's the approach. I mean, that's really intense, but that's the approach that you want to take for most of the shots you play. So it's not about quantity. I think that you were telling me earlier about a guy,
the gentleman
who hit more balls in a year than anybody else.
Yes.
So how much did he improve?
So he broke the record in November, the first week of November, and it's not you, Core, so don't worry. He hit so many balls, and the boys in the shop said, "Hey, this guy's broken the record." And this is the first week of November, and he still had the rest of November and December to go. So he absolutely obliterated it. The guy went out 4 shots. He started on 14, hit more balls than anyone on the planet, and he's gone out to 18. So hitting practice shot after practice shot after practice shot really didn't help him. And I saw him some days and he would be sweating. His shirt would have to be wrung out. And this is on about a 15-degree day. Yeah. So what he was doing, I would call exercise, not golf training.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but unfortunately, I think there's this myth that the tour players hit buckets and buckets and buckets of golf balls. I think the average person would be surprised at the elite level what happens. So from
Yeah.
your experience of teaching at the elite level, in a tournament week, how many balls would they hit?
It varies from player to player. Some players love hitting golf balls, and that makes for a great story. It almost implies that if you want to be really good, you have to use the expression that was given from Hogan, who's over my right shoulder here, digging the answers out of the dirt. The implication that the more you practice, the better you'll get, with no other criteria attached. But during a tournament week, players will warm up, and then after that, they may hit some shots afterwards. So a warm-up might consist of anything from some players 25 balls, other players might hit 50, but that's sort of about the limit, because of course your neural system's being fatigued every time you hit a shot. If you hit, let's say, half a dozen drivers in a row with a very short period in between, and I know you showed me some footage of a guy doing exactly that, you'll find that if you then pick up a wedge and try and hit a short pitch shot, your body's buzzing, because the energy that your nervous system energy that's been expended in hitting those drivers has sort of got you to a point where your body does feel like it's buzzing. So you've got to let it settle. And so that's a good reason to take time between shots. And that's what the good players do. They don't hit balls. They're not in a competition to see how many they can hit in an hour or in a day.
Would it be fair to say that a lot of the players would spend more time on the golf course during that week?
Oh, absolutely. Well, a tournament round's going to be around about an average of 5 hours, and they would their practice before and afterwards is probably going to be an hour and a half maximum. Yeah, some players, it's generally going to vary between about 45 minutes for the players who don't physically warm up very much, although that group is getting smaller and smaller all the time. So a lot of players will go into the locker room, and in the locker room there'll be physiotherapists and sometimes masseurs. Sometimes they'll have their own trainers and they'll stretch, use spiky balls and rollers.
No wonder they play so well.
Yeah.
They don't just get out of the car and go to the shop and buy a coffee and have a couple of practice swings, 3 putts, and go and tee off.
No.
And expect to play well.
Yeah.
How about I show this video of the guy?
Yeah. Because he meets a lot of the things that we were just talking about.
Yeah, so hopefully this guy isn't watching, but I think there's a few people that will... Well, what happened there? He stopped.
I didn't think he took a rest.
No, he didn't. Oh, technology's wonderful. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll share it again, and we will see what happens this time around. Of course, it's not working. Okay.
He heard you.
He must have. He's gone camera shy. Can I? No, it's totally carked itself. That's all right. We'll go back and I'll reload it. So I'll work behind the background and see if we can get it back up again. So you keep talking in the meantime.
So so he's your typical practicer. He probably goes to the range with one club, and we just saw what that was. He hits
the driver.
Close to 100 balls an hour, and maybe even with that club. Now, that's exhausting. So even though his anonymity was protected, I wonder how many who are watching would put their hands up or are feeling guilty. Oh, maybe that's me. Oh, it sounds like he's going there now.
He was. It's frozen again. Oh dear, don't worry.
That's all right. I think we know we know what he's going to do. We're just going to watch him hit driver after driver.
Yeah, no practice swing, no thought about what he's doing, just bang, away he goes again.
Yeah.
So there's a lesson, don't rely on technology.
No.
So it's funny, you said earlier about about not being able to take what people have learnt from the golf course, from the range to the golf course. And that's probably the question that I get asked a lot is, why is it that I hit it so well on the range, and if I just put my club back in the bag and walk to the first tee, I can't replicate what was happening on the range?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people
really
out there.
Good point.
So there's a lot of people out there that will be saying, yeah, that's what happens to me. So I have my theories on it, and I think it's mainly because people are just hitting shot after shot after shot. Whereas if you break it up and do the things that you were talking about and aim at different targets, try and hit with different speeds, hit in different directions, hit firmly, hit soft shots, but more importantly, I think grabbing a swimming noodle or something like that and trying to stand on with your left leg on a swimming noodle, so you're replicating an uneven lie, because you can rip it down the first fairway and all of a sudden you've got a shot where the ball's below your feet or above your feet, and golf ranges don't allow you to practice that way.
No, they don't. And they're excellent examples of building variety into your practice. So one of the things that we can do really well is we can replicate movement within a very narrow time frame. And I think from memory, that's around about 6 or 7 seconds or something like that, maybe a little bit longer. And so how that might work in a range session. And when I say range session, I'm sort of talking putting as well. So you might get on a roll where you're doing a putting drill and where you hole a number of putts and all of a sudden you lose that. So on the range, you hit a good shot, you've got the feel, you hit another shot, it's like, oh yes, I've got that feel now. And then the attitude, and I'm as guilty as anybody of this when I was younger and playing, is I need to drill this in so that my body remembers it. I mean, your brain's remembering movement. But unfortunately, we're not machines. And so you practice those shots, you get on a roll, you find your rhythm with it, which is probably the biggest part of that. And then you lose it. And then the whole thing falls apart and you wonder, what happened? So and this is the hard part of making yourself build variety into your practice, because we're not machines, you need to be able to make micro adjustments to your swing. So an example of that is there's really sophisticated methods of monitoring movement. And when they're put on those movement sensors, say, are put on the best players in the world, the one thing that does show is that every swing is a little bit different. Now, watching with the naked eye, we'd say, no. Every swing is the same with this player, male, female, world-class player. They're all swinging the same way every single time. And they're not. So
no, there's always a variance. There's a variance in slight club face angle, slight path. It might only be 1 degree or half a degree, but there's always a variance. Yeah,
absolutely.
But the variance is much smaller for those players than the average player.
Correct. So it's about narrowing those variances. And what happens over time is that you build up a movement habit. So your body actually starts to remember what that movement is. And then as the more you do that, the more you build a feel for your swing. The easiest way to mess that up is to jump from swing thought to swing thought in an attempt to try and get something better. So you're not actually establishing any real solid feel for your shot.
I've got clients that have a different swing thought on every shot they hit.
Yeah.
They never use the same swing thought twice.
Yeah.
So and Steve's put a little comment up there. How do you feels from the practice to the course? I assume he means how do you take the feel? Yeah. And one thing I remember when I played is I would have a thought for the day, and on the range and prior to teeing off, the thought might have been, I'm just gonna cock my wrists a little bit early on the backswing, and that was my key thought. So every shot I hit, that's the feeling I had. Yeah. But tomorrow I would go out, the next day I would go out, and that feel wouldn't work because I've probably just cocking my wrists a little bit too much. So tomorrow's thought was quite often I'm going to delay my wrist cock going back. So the reality is I was keeping myself within this band of where I was, even though the two thoughts were opposite each other. So it's okay to have different thoughts on different days. You just don't want it on the same day.
Yeah, and I would say particularly if you're looking to, take feels to the golf course, the more you're working with dynamic feels. So what I mean by that is if your focus is on rhythm. So it's not a hard technique thought. Rhythm, tempo, which is your swing speed, balance, general coordination, which is like a global feel of how my body and my arms and the club are sort of working or syncing together. When you're thinking of global things like that, it's much easier to get away from the hard technical thoughts, and you're more likely to play better straight away.
Yeah. So Jeff Cohen's raised an interesting one, and that's should we play course on the range? And I remember, do you remember the story about Peter Fowler, when he won the Australian Open at Kingston Heath?
Tell me.
So that was back in, whatever year it was. 1982, I think it was, maybe not, 83, 84, somewhere like that. He was a good player, and he tried to get on and have a practice round at Kingston Heath prior to the tournament, and they wouldn't let him. So this was on the Sunday. So what he did is he went to Patterson River, where he was practicing at the time, and his caddy knew Kingston Heath really well. So what they decided to do is they would picture every single hole at Kingston Heath on the practice fairway at the old Patterson River, and he played every single hole, even to the point where he would hit the ball onto the green to 25 feet, and they just walk a few metres over to the putting green, and he'd have to hold a 25-footer.
Yeah.
So he was playing around in real time without the walk on every hole at Kingston Heath, and he went on to win. So It's a great story, and it's an underutilised practice method.
Look, Jeff, that's your comment. It won't. If you do that, it won't guarantee that you win an Australian Open.
Oh, damn.
But that's another example of combining building variety into your golf and also adding the competitive element as well. So really good, good thought. Play the golf course on the range.
Here's a good question. Any thoughts on the classic versus the modern swing?
Oh, wow. Well, first thing is I'd be asking for a definition of what they are. Second is to say that equipment has made a massive difference in the way that we have to swing the golf club, or the way that we do swing the golf club. Balls, clubs, particularly the shaft in the golf club. Has had a big influence on that. Mostly classic swings, it's generally considered round sort of hickory days, or even slightly after that. There were constraints on a lot of players where they were particularly Scottish, where they're wearing a lot of clothing because of the conditions they're playing in. Of course, that's going to influence how they swing. And everybody over time loves to copy what the best players do. And so most of the swings from the hickory era that were thought to be good were copied from player to player. And even when I started playing when I was younger, there was no video or anything like that. So it was only the opinion of the better players that was really followed as to what made a good golf swing. Yeah.
Yes.
Whereas now it's very different.
And the modern swing, I suppose, the power game, the power swing, the Brysons and people like that. before you can even attempt to do that, if anyone's watching this now and they think, I'm going to try and go hard at it, some of these guys work out incredibly hard at the gym. And if you don't have that core strength, and if you don't have the muscles to support that type of swing, you will injure yourself, and we don't want that happening. So it's a case of, you don't just decide today, I'm going to swing like this tomorrow. If you really want to go down that path, you've really got to start working out in the gym if that's the way you want to go. And my question would be, what would be the gain? Why do you need to do that? What's your goal? Is it to knock 2 or 3 shots off your score? There's probably other ways that you could do that without interfering with your golf swing that would be better and pay better results.
There was an interesting article that I saw, I think it might have even been on the weekend, and it talked about the number of golfing age people that wanted to become professionals in different countries in the world. And I think in Australia it was something like 1 in 16,000 would actually make it as a pro, or would become a professional if they wanted to. So the numbers are really small. If we're looking at players who are swinging the club really quickly and training, we're also talking about players that are typically aged in their sort of mid-20s to early 30s. And so we're all naturally strongest during that time anyway. But just like I can't swing the golf club as quickly as what the younger players can now. Well, sorry.
Are you finding that too?
Swung the club. I couldn't have swung the club when I was as young as what they were, simply because my nervous system wasn't such that I could. It's like I can't run as fast as Usain Bolt. Even if I have good running technique, I'm still not going to be able to do that. So the genetics definitely come into it. So that's part of it.
Now, John's asked a good question here. What are your thoughts on good players changing their swings while playing tournaments? So I would be thinking along the lines of, the classic, someone's playing bad, so the coach spends some time on the range with them trying to change their golf swing, which is the perception. And some of the commentators probably say that. If the player has a regular coach and they work within a framework and something might be a little off, so what they're not doing is they're not changing their golf swing. They're trying to get, and quite often it is grip, stance, posture, ball position and alignment, because they're the fundamentals, and there's nothing worse than competitive golf to ruin your alignment, ball position, stance, posture. So it might, and what quite often happens is they're not making changes to their swing. They're trying to just get themselves back on track to within their range. So it is a common misconception. What are your thoughts on that?
That's absolutely what it is. Then they're nudging the player back on track. I don't know of any time that it's been something that's been completely different that a player's never worked on before. It's usually something that they have worked on before that they may have forgotten. It may be a trigger that they've used in the past, which again is just nudging them back on track. But from a player's perspective, they may report that as being this dramatic change. And if it's something like the ball not being struck in the middle of the club face, then that can feel really, really different. If the ball's not being struck in the middle of the club face and then it is, it's a huge difference.
Yes, and no one will pick what the change is. You can't see it, but the player will feel it, and it'll feel like it's that big, but it's actually just a tiny little thing. Now, Patrick's got back to us about the definition between the modern or the classic and the modern swing. So Jack's the classic and Tiger is modern. And I think it's probably fair to say that the reason the golf swing has changed is one, equipment has changed.
Yes.
The ball has changed.
Yeah.
The fact that when I played, there was one player that would work out in the gym, and most of the other people would laugh at him. Do you know the name of the guy? Do you know the name of the guy that worked out in the gym?
There are a few who did. I was one, but I know you're not referring to me.
We didn't play at the
no,
same time. Blonde hair Queenslander. Loves getting his gear off these days, yeah. But we won't go down that path. Yeah, he was the only one that worked in the gym. Yeah. And the others didn't work in the gym. Now you'd be lucky to find someone that didn't work in the gym. So video, force plates, swing catalyst, all the 3D analysis, they've all made changes to the golf swing for the better or the worse. Yeah. But I think that's why. And if Jack had all of this stuff available to him now, I'm pretty sure he would be using everything as well. So
I'm pretty sure he would.
Yeah.
Our understanding of how the golf swing works, how the body works, from science, from sports science, particularly biomechanics, has changed dramatically over the last 30 years. To the point now where information and understanding about that is available to all coaches. I mean, it's available to all people, but coaches sort of have a background of understanding which allows them to then add on to that, so that when information comes in that looks highly technical, we can it's our job to dumb it down essentially, or just to apply whatever's required to the individual in front of us.
Yes, I always think of a still. So, all the complicated stuff goes in the top, and all that comes out of the bottom is the essence. And it's my job to deliver the essence, not worry about all the technical stuff. And it's just, I've got to give you one tiny little thing to make that easier for you.
That's I think right. John's... you understand how the system works, so that if you make a change, even if it's something like a change to right hand on the grip or something like that, you know what the likely effect of that's going to be for the whole system, how the rest of the golf swing is going to work, and how the player's going to be able to cope with that and all the rest of it. But it's your background of understanding that allows you to do that. Yeah,
and that's the benefit of having years under the belt and making a lot of mistakes in my early career, as we all did. I think Dale Lynch said once at a coaching summit that he should give all the money back to the first 1,000 lessons he gave, because he learnt more than they did. And I think that's pretty much how it all is. Now, I think John Hughes, the MVP tonight, is asking the most questions and the best questions. So what are your thoughts on training both left and right-handed?
Okay, so I can interpret that question in two ways, John. One is to say, if I'm a right-handed golfer, should I practice left-handed? That's one way of answering the question.
I think that's what he's getting at. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, very good. So first of all, the golf swing is quite a unilateral movement. In other words, you're predominantly, if you're a right-handed golfer, you're predominantly working the muscles on one side of your body to make the movement of a right-handed golf swing. Your body can get out of balance because those muscles are going to be developed more and work differently in the golf swing to what the muscles are, say the muscles on the other side of the body. So it's a good way to balance them up. It's also good to even experiment and say, well, what happens if I try, if you're a right-handed golfer, what happens if I try doing this left-handed? So, I mean, that's more of a fun thing.
Yeah, I remember I had a little bit of an injury when I was playing, and I went to get a massage, and the person giving me the massage says, "What do you do for a living? I've never felt a body like this." And there I was thinking, "Hey, this is pretty good." I was in trim nick back then, but she said, "I can't believe the muscles on the right side of your body versus the muscles on your left side of the body." And she said, "I don't understand golf, but I know physiologically that's not a good thing. So you should do something on the other side of your body." So what I used to do then is I would probably practice for half an hour each week, left-handed. Yeah. And I did it with a right-handed club turned upside down. And everyone that's had a lesson from me at some point has seen my party trick where I hit it left-handed with a right-handed club. And it got to the point where I can actually play off single figures left-handed, high single figures. But yeah, but I did it primarily for my body. And the benefit was if I was stuck behind a tree in the middle of a game of golf, I could just turn up the 8-iron upside down and advance it down the fairway 100, 120 metres. That's shot saved. That's dollars in the back pocket.
Yeah.
So it's got a double thing.
If you look at most long-term golfers, you watch them walking, like watching them from the back, it's probably a little bit easiest. And you'll see that their right shoulder is actually lower than their left.
Yes.
It does, and I'm not talking professional golfers exclusively here. I'm talking all golfers that have been playing for a while. And that's because the muscles down the right side of the back particularly, but even including the hip, have shortened a bit because of the work that they've been doing over an extended period of time. Yeah, and so unless there's something done to correct that imbalance, there's a potential for injury. Some players are quite extreme, never feel any pain. Others are very mild and get sore backs and hips. So, best to do the preventative stuff and the recovery stuff. And if part of that's swinging left-handed, then do that too.
Now, John said here, when making a swing change, do you think you're better working on movement changes without hitting balls, just cutting grass and working on the movements you want? I listened to a podcast recently where Nick Faldo was interviewed, and it was all about Nick changing his golf swing back when he wanted to be a better player. And the interviewer, I can't remember which podcast it was, he's been on a few, but the interviewer said, would you do it again? And he said, if I had my time over, I would do it again. I would have started 2 months earlier, but I would have hit less balls. He said, unfortunately, I was bordering on exhaustion at the end of the day, and I probably did more harm than good. I would have made the changes faster by practice swinging in front of a mirror and just simulating the different positions he was trying to get into and the different moves, and hit a lot less balls, because he said by the time you hit so many balls, you're exhausted and your learning goes out the window at that point.
Exactly.
So I think that's probably a bit of an answer to that question, John.
Yeah, John, that's a great question. So when I look at that question, one of the important things is that we do have feedback, and the ball provides us with the ultimate feedback. But there are going to be times when we don't necessarily want that feedback from the ball, because it's very easy to hit a shot and then to respond to that shot. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're hitting shots on the range. There might even be a left to right wind, and you keep slicing it. And so what happens is you don't like the slice. So you start making little adjustments to try and compensate for that. And generally that'll mean sort of swinging the club more from outside to in, because you're trying to pull the ball left to start with. So the ball will give us feedback. So back to your question, where you're asking, should I just make swings where I'm cutting the grass? It depends on what cutting the grass is going to do as far as providing you feedback. So, for example, you may be looking at a patch of grass on the ground and trying to just clip that while you're holding the particular swing thought. So when the club swings through, is the club meeting the grass in the right point? In other words, is it not hitting the ground too soon or not hitting the ground at all? Is it hitting the ground too far away from you, which would be a heel strike, or is it hitting the ground too close to you, which would be a toe strike? So yes, there can be benefit in just making those practice swings, but ultimately you need to know whether or not that movement is going to translate into better struck shots. So if you're removing the distraction of the ball's strike and the ball's flight, then yeah, that can be helpful, particularly if let's say you're making a grip change, which let's face it, none of us really like to do that, but a lot of the time it's if your coach has suggested it, that it's probably necessary. Then making swings to start with where you're not getting the ball flight, as you start to make a few swings and become familiar with that feeling, that can be beneficial. but then you need to introduce the ball at some point. So again, you're getting the feedback to be able to know what influence that grip change is actually having.
Good answer. And here's one for you, Pete, from Jeff.
Okay, let's define the difference between practice and play. So practice is about me. It's about what am I doing in order to make the golf ball go where I want it to. So I'm focused on me, how I'm moving, how I'm swinging the golf club. So I'm focused on, technique, if you like. Play, on the other hand, is suspending thoughts of technique, and my objective is to have a target orientation, a target focus. And so my objective is to hit the ball to my target, to that point there. So they're really quite different. Now, I can practice on the golf course where I can be thinking about my swing and playing shots, whether that's in a competition or just during a practice round. And conversely, I can play on the range, which we talked a little bit about earlier. You can set yourself up competitive situations against another person, against yourself, hitting a certain number of balls to a target, or you may be just changing target and changing club every single time and being very focused on shot outcome, not necessarily how you're doing it. The more you think about golf swing, especially on the golf course, because you're always still considering where you want the ball to go, the more you're likely to interfere with an automated movement or semi-automated movement. In other words, you're more likely to mess yourself up by focusing on technique on the golf course. Very different thing to have one little swing thought just to almost to be the mortar to hold everything together. But generally speaking, be target oriented on the golf course, because you'll find that even if the shots are mishit a little bit, they'll generally tend to go more toward where you want them to go than if you're focused on how you're trying to do it. You're going to get a lot more variation in your shot results if you're focused on swing on the golf course.
Very good. Now we've also got an interesting one here from the MVP, John Hugh. What are your thoughts on cross-training for golf doing other sports, to say javelin and discus, and what other activities have good crossover to golf that you recommend? That's a really good question.
Best training for golf, play as many different sports as you possibly can, because there's always transfer. And we're talking, obviously we've got to talk about, players at different ages. So the best grounding for a player as they're coming up is to do multi-sports. They become more familiar with balance. They have better body awareness, and then they can adapt that awareness and movement into all sorts of different activities. So kids that are good at sport will generally play a whole range of sports. Then they become good at a whole lot of sports. One, because they know they're good and they'll have a crack at a whole lot of different ones, and then they'll become good at those. But then they can transfer that into other activities as well. If we look at the question and say, I think what I'll do now, I've been playing golf for 20 years. I'm whatever age I am, even if I'm 30. Obviously, I'm not 30, but even if I'm 30 or 40.
I'll be 32.
30, that's right. Then I'm starting to introduce quite different movements. My body's going to rebel, same as if you go to the gym. When you first start going to the gym, even if you do using light weights, your body's going to get sore. But those other activities, I think they're always good to supplement for golf anyway. There comes a point where through specialization, now that may be that I've chosen to play golf as my primary sport because I'm at an age where I can't, play footy or cricket or run around the netball court anymore. My body doesn't like me doing that. And I've always played golf, so I'm going to stick with it. So golf becomes your primary sport, but it's still good to have something as a supplement to that. And that could be something like doing a general gym program. So I've got a lot of friends in the fitness industry, sports physiologists, guys who are specializing in golf, but I'll say your objective is to have a balanced body when you're training. So don't worry, don't get caught up too much in all this golf specific. I think it's nonsense, most of it. But do something that's going to keep your body balanced. So doing things like Pilates, yoga, although yoga doesn't provide too much of a strength element compared to, say, some of those other things, but they're good. They're good supplements to your golf.
And yoga is good for your breathing and handling stress. And when you're in the pressure environment of the golf course, and, you know, you've got to have a par up the last to win $5 off your best mate. And how do you handle that pressure? And the breathing is a good element. I remember back in my trainee days, back in the good old days when we used to play 36 holes every Monday, there'd be 2 other golf pros that would stay at my house because they both lived in the country. So after playing 36 holes on the Monday, we'd go to the Mentone 10-pin bowl, which is no longer there, and we would all go 10-pin bowling. And I always found that 10-pin bowling was great for my golf swing because it was getting the release of the hand going. And the better I bowled, the better I was playing at the time. And if I was struggling, particularly if I started fading it instead of drawing it, I'd go and have a few extra games of 10-pin bowling during the week, and I'd always try. My draw would always come back.
Yeah, you're working with balance, rhythm, arm swing, body rotation, and of course, you know, as you said, if you're bowling with your right hand, there's an element of say rotation through your hand and your wrist, which you can then apply to your golf swing as well.
Yeah, and I think tennis is good. You've got some rotational. Just as many different things as you possibly can.
It's interesting that John wrote in there javelin and discus. Javelin, there's a lot of parallels with the movement, transfer of momentum with javelin, as with a golf swing.
Yeah, or throwing a ball for that matter. It's a very similar action.
Throwing a ball is fantastic practice. Yeah, interesting. Javelin was I was a multi-sport background, but when I was doing athletics and things like that, javelin was my go, and I threw with my left arm, but I'm a right-handed golfer, so I don't know how much cross benefit there was for me.
But your body was nice and even.
Yeah, nice and even.
Yes. No, I think it's good. We've got some really good questions tonight, haven't we? Yeah. Now, Cor's probably aimed this one at me. Why do I think the right thumb is important?
Better to have one than not have one.
Absolutely, yes. But I always look at it, if you are right-handed, your right hand's going to do a fair bit in the golf swing because it's your strength. Now, you've got 5 digits on your right hand. Which are the strongest? It's not that one, and it's not that one, and it's not that one. So if I had a drink here, which I just happen to have, if I'm going to open the drink, I'm going to do it with my thumb and my pointer finger. I'm not going to wrap my hand around it and do it that way. So purely for strength and feel, I was very fortunate when I was younger to see a guy called Sevi Ballesteros practicing at I think it was the main Nicholas Championship at Royal Melbourne back in the late 70s. And back then the practice facility wasn't where it is now. So they used to use one of the holes on the west course that was out of play. West. Yeah, and it was up behind where the old water tank used to be. So every time there was a tournament in Melbourne, I'd have dental issues and wouldn't go to school, and I'd go to Royal Melbourne to get my dental issues sorted out. And there was just myself watching Sevi. And I remember he just looked at me and he started talking in broken English, and he said to me, basically, he didn't say these words, I can't remember, but he basically said, son, the right hand is where the magic is. And it's always stayed with me.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers that one for you, Cor.
Yeah, and he's probably asking about placement of the right thumb too. So have a little experiment. So the right thumb normally will sit slightly on the left side of the grip. So if you make a golf swing and swing to the top of your swing, and just notice the pressure on your right thumb from the grip, then put your right thumb incorrectly, put your right thumb on the right side of the grip and make that same swing. And you'll notice that all of a sudden the positional support and the feeling is going to change dramatically. So you're not going to get the same support for the golf club at the top of the swing. So it's nothing to do with strength in your right hand at the top of the swing. It's purely positional and support. So yeah, have a play with that.
We've got another good one here. Is the mental part of the game something that you need to tune up, like your golf swing? How do you evaluate a player's mental game? Yeah,
okay,
I think
that's a 2-hour podcast.
I actually think we could do another one of these purely on the mental side. And last year in our first lockdown, I ran a mental training course on Zoom, and some of the people that are in this group attended that, and it was just I think it was 8 or 10 people. It was fantastic. It was a 4-week course that we ran, and I was using a performance psychologist friend of mine that was part of it. And yeah, I think it's an area that everyone can improve. And I always love Jack Nicklaus's comment: golf is 90% mental, and the other 10% is mental too. So yeah, you see people spending hours on the range belting golf balls, but you don't see people meditating and practicing their thought processes. So there's certainly things this is part of your area of your doctorate, for want of a better word.
It is actually, and having questions like this, and Steve, I will respond to the question. Partly having so many questions similar to the question Steve has asked about the importance of the mental game and whether you need to tune it up or not. I wrote a book called Iron Golf Mind, where it talks about 5 C's, and those 5 C's are confidence, concentration, commitment, composure, and competitiveness. And to answer and they're all really, really important, particularly the confidence aspect. And confidence, of course, can go up and down, but you definitely need to tune it up. So we can talk first of all about how beliefs come into things. So let's say you're looking to improve your game. Do you believe that it's possible for someone to improve their golf game? And second, do you think it's possible for you to improve your golf game? So that's sort of like a fundamental starting point. Ideally, the answer is yes, because it should be yes. There's a girl who wrote a very famous book, a woman, I should say, who wrote a very famous book called Grit, and her name is Angela Duckworth, and she sort of talked about talent. And interestingly, her approach to talent was something that I hadn't seen before, where she sort of talked about it more being a time factor. So what do I mean by that? So a person who's really talented, who puts in some effort, is going to improve quickly. A person who is less talented, who puts in some serious effort, is going to improve, but not quite as quickly. So the implication is we all have talent, but we're going to progress at different rates. So first of all, yes, you have to believe that you can improve. And second, yes, you definitely do need to work on it. And so that's going to be things like noticing what your self-talk is like. Is it helpful self-talk? Is it the sort of self-talk that you would say to a friend of yours, or have a friend say to you without getting upset? You know, is it helpful and supportive? And so noticing what you would commonly say to yourself, and then checking yourself. I mean, we'll all be sort of disparaging to ourselves from time to time. That's all normal. Confidence going up and down is going to be based mostly around success and how you're currently performing. But what's your baseline? Do you have a belief that, you know, you can play this game? Not whether you can play it and shoot par or rate par or whatever, but, you know, can you actually play the game? So working on your routines in practice, they're all elements of building mental games, because you will build, part of that is building, you know, visual representations of and field representations of shots that you're going to hit. You know, imagining the shot you're going to hit, getting a feel for that shot you're going to hit, and doing that in practice, because that is transferable to the golf course. When I say feel for the shots and visualizing those shots. I'm not just talking full shots, but also short shots and putting. So we need to be really vigilant on watching how we treat ourselves, mentally for golf. And so that's, that's a constant tune up. That was a great question too.
And this book that you've written, where can people get hold of that?
Through the easiest place to get, you can get it through Amazon. And I think I can't remember what price I've put on at the moment. It's a nice low price anyway. That's for the digital book or the physical book. And you can also get it via my website, which is peterknightgolf.com.au under the
there
resources
it is
page.
down the bottom. And in the description of this YouTube video, I've got a link to Peter's website. And I suppose you would make more money if you sold it from your website rather than Amazon.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
we're
in lockdown.
You won't get a signed copy through Amazon.
Absolutely, we're in lockdown. I mean, we're not earning any money at the moment. So, if you're going to buy the book, buy it from his website. Don't go and make Jeff Bezos more money. He's going to the moon. So, yeah, give us a break there. Now, I think we've got another question here from Citizen Charles. I'll get rid of this other stuff. It might be hard to see. And speaking of shot routine, is there little discussed keys to proper alignment? I'm not sure. Does that mean that the Roanoke mean anything to you?
Yeah, Roanoke's a place in the US. So
okay.
Yeah, so the question, yes, absolutely. Alignment is key. If you're unsettled in your mind, so this would be the opposite case. If you're unsettled in your mind when you're standing over a shot as to whether you're lined up correctly or not, it's going to likely affect the outcome of the shot. Having any sort of doubt there is going to be very destructive. So the thing that most players will do is pick an intermediate target. So when they stand behind the ball, they'll look at something on the ground. It could be a leaf, a piece of grass. If it's on a tee, it could be a broken tee or an old divot or something like that. And quite specifically, so it might be the left side of an old divot or something like that. So and again, you're from Roanoke, so a yard or two in front of the ball rather than a meter. And then the player will line up. And if you watch tournaments, which is where we get the best chance to watch the male and female golfers who are experts in their craft, most of them will stand behind the ball before they approach the ball to play a shot. One of the things that they're doing is the vast majority of them will be selecting an intermediate target. So something that's on the ground, a yard or two in front of them. And then when they approach the ball, the first thing they'll do is line the club face up to go straight over that intermediate target. And then they'll line up parallel to an imaginary line running between that intermediate target and the club face. And if they're lined up correctly to that intermediate target, then they're also going to be lined up correctly to the target. And then again, that's something that you should practice. You should do that like for every single shot on the golf course. And if you're on the range, that takes a little bit more time, but use alignment sticks or use your clubs just to ensure that you are lined up correctly. Because if you set yourself up, say on the range, you know that your alignment rod or your golf club on the ground is lined up correctly. And then you set yourself up and then you look at the target and it doesn't look straight. It doesn't look like you're lined up correctly. Then you'll know that there's something that's not quite right with the way you're perceiving where that target is. So definitely do more of that. That also, by picking those intermediate targets on the golf course, it helps to ensure that you're removing that doubt about whether you're lined up straight or not.
Yeah, and I think the other thing with alignment, there's three elements that we have to align, and people forget all three. You've got to align your feet. Well, it's actually feet, hips, shoulders. We'll call that one. But you've also got to aim the club face. And a lot of people forget the club face.
Mm.
So you can use an alignment stick to get your body pointing in the right direction. But I think it's great to have 2 alignment sticks stuck in the ground like little goalposts. So you've got to focus on your start line. Now, your start line might not be in the direction of the flagstick. If you hit it with a fade, you're going to have it start slightly left of that. But you've really got to focus on getting your start line through those 2 goalposts, and start wide, be generous, and as your skill gets better, you can make that narrower. And I think that's a really good training method.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you could also, if you've got 2 clubs or 2 alignment sticks, you could put one down on a line that's parallel to your target line. So your target line's the line running from the ball to the target, and you're setting up parallel to that. You could put a second at right angles to it, so it's going to run sort of between your legs. And then you've got 2 references to check if your club face alignment is correct. One, the club that's running through your legs, is the bottom of your club face parallel to that, and is it at right angles to the other one? I hope that makes sense without a visual.
Yeah, you're basically having a letter T, and you've got. I think you explained that well. Yeah. So Core says we play in 90 and want to play to 80, or we play in 80 and want to break 70. What's the biggest tip?
Okay. When you're on the golf course, so you're playing around and you're at the 15th hole and you're playing about, let's say your normal score is 90. So, which is 18 over par. And you get to the 15th hole and you're 13 over par or 12 over par. Something inside your head is going to go, oh my God, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to break 90. And chances are you'll limp home and maybe not even break 90.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you might get to that 15th hole and you're already 20 over par. So you're definitely not going to break 90 unless you make some birdies. And you sort of think, oh, bugger, you just relax. And then you par the next few holes. And you sort of think, where was that all along? So we've got this concept of ourselves as golfers. Now, part of that concept is knowing what our scoring ability is. And scoring ability works in a range. You score differently every day. So the first thing, the biggest tip, is to change your concept about, this sounds really simple. It's not. Changing your concept about who are you as a golfer? Are you a golfer that generally scores around 90 or around 80 or around 70? And most of the time, we've sort of got this inbuilt self-corrective mechanism, as much as sometimes we love it and sometimes we hate it, which brings us back to that point. If you look statistically at what it takes to, say, move from a bracket of playing in the 90s to in the 80s to the 70s, say a 10 shot change, it's probably only going to be maybe hitting 2 more fairways a round, regardless of how many you hit now, maybe 2 more greens per round, cutting out a couple of 3 putts, and maybe dropping a penalty. And you sort of think, I can do that. And it's not that difficult. But we also have to think about, say, shot dispersion. So when you play your shots, if you're hitting 10 drivers or any club at all, if you hit 10 shots with that club, how wide an area are those shots spread over? And what we want to do over time is tighten that dispersion. So if let's say you hit driver and we look from left to right, and the shots furthest left and furthest right, the gap between the two is 60 meters. If you bring that gap down to 50, and I'm going to make up some numbers here, but if you bring that gap down to 50 and you do the same with every other club, relatively speaking, you're not going to drop, hit your pitching wedge 10 meters closer on every shot on average. You'll find that those incremental changes, while they don't seem like much, they actually add up to 10 shots very, very quickly. And so that's just refining what you do with every part of your game, and, you know, getting rid of the dumb shots, which a lot of us do, which comes back to strategy.
I think it's also important to actually have a game plan. And I think we can utilise these times at the moment where we can't play golf. And in the state of Victoria where we live, golf is banned currently. So I think people should be able to just play each hole at your golf course in your mind and find different ways of playing the hole, and then working out, and you use Google Earth, and you can measure how far different objects are and find a way of navigating your way around the course. But once you've got your game plan for the day, stick to it. Don't let the circumstances that you're 12 over par instead of your normal 18 over par change the fact that on this hole you should be hitting your 5 wood off the tee, if that's your goal, and learn to have the discipline to do it. Tiger was fantastic at having the discipline to not let the circumstances change his game plan.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, your game plan should essentially say, given my level of skill, how should I play this hole so that I can get the best outcome? And so if that's the basis for your strategy, which it should be, it's sort of like the fundamental question for strategy, then why would you change that and suddenly try something that carries a greater risk? So usually that comes undone.
Now, Jeff's referenced this golf book. Some guy's written a book, 30 practice drills. Who's that guy, Pete?
Jeff, well done. That's a free download on my website, and there are more than 30 practice drills in there. Thank you, Jeff.
So they can get that from your website again?
Yeah, front page. It's a free download. I think the way I've set that up, they just put in their name and their email, and they'll get the book. Yeah,
so there it is there at the bottom, peterknightgolf.com.au, and there is a link in the description of their video, so you can find it in there. Core loves the answer that you gave him before. Here we go. Any thoughts on other golf YouTubers? Personally, I don't like Rick Shields, but I like the Golf Doctor. Excellent man. And recently, Craig Ballard. I think you should check out Peter Knight as well. So there's one YouTuber you definitely should look up. I have to be honest, and I'm aware of most of the golfers on YouTube, and I don't watch each one as religiously as I do because I don't want to copy them. But I have been watching a little bit more lately, and there's so many of them. So I think what I would be doing is look at everybody and then say, did I enjoy that? Were they bringing to the table something that I can relate to? And if they do, go on to them, because it's a bit like everyone. What I think is going to be good, Peter might say, no, that's absolute rubbish. And it's okay to have different opinions. So search far and wide and have a look at everybody and take on board what you think is good for you. Do you watch anyone? Do you watch anyone, Pete?
I do. Yeah, I do watch some of the other coaches and what they present and how they present it. And for the most part, they all have good information. Now, some of that information is going to be relevant to a group of golfers and not relevant to another group of golfers, depending on where they are in their journey. And then there's this sort of relatedness. You know, do I relate to that particular presenter, that particular golf coach? Do I like his or her manner and their style? And some of those styles will attract us, and some won't. And all, everybody's different. That's why there's different golf coaches. Most of us as golf coaches have much the same information. We may present it differently, and we have our own personalities which come into it, exactly the same as the YouTubers. So
yeah. No one's actually out there making a video to try and hurt anybody. But we all have different ways of explaining the same thing. And quite often, the analogy I give is if you're doing an English class in year 12 at school and you decide that there's 4 classes in the school doing the same book, if you were to do 4 sessions with this class and then 4 sessions with the next class and 4 sessions, you probably wouldn't pass the subject. But if you stick to the one class, you have the best chance of success. So it's not, I don't think it's a great idea to chop and change coaches every single week. This is a true story. I once had a golfer who is legendary in Melbourne. It was a guy called Ian McMullen who started Spotless Catering. Anyway, Ian, when I was at Riversdale, he came for a lesson, and the usual question, when did you have your last lesson? About an hour and 20 minutes ago. He'd come straight from Brian Twite at Metropolitan to me at Riversdale. It's probably not the best formula for success, but I think it's probably best you stick to your coach if you're happy with him, and just give what that coach is telling you the chance to embed itself. But if you keep chopping and changing, it's not a great formula. And you look at the best players in the world, they really don't chop and change that much. They stick to their coaches in the main.
Yeah.
Now, John has got a technical question here aimed at you, Pete.
Okay, so John's asked, how do you train leg and hip action in the swing? Can you go into how you see the legs and hips working through the swing? Wow. That is a massive question.
That's a YouTube live session by itself.
I can, you know what? I'm actually going to take the cop out here and go to my channel, because I've put quite a lot on there on leg and hip action. I mean, it's fundamental to understand how legs and hips work, what they do, how they coordinate the movement. That's a massive question. So I've sort of ducked it a little bit, John. So sorry to do that to you, only because it's a massive question that's not a 2-minute answer.
No, it's not. But in fairness, John could look at your website and look at your YouTube videos, and you might have 10 on that subject. But then John could come and see you personally, and you might tell him something totally different to the videos that you have on YouTube, because it could be that John's incapable of moving in a particular way through a physical injury or any number of reasons. So it's sort of a bit of a poison chalice, the old YouTube video. So I always think it's best to get one-on-one when you can for something of that technical nature.
Yeah. Unless John, there's something that's more specific about that. But that would be my best thing, is to plug my YouTube channel, go there, have a look at some of those videos there.
Absolutely, and there's a link to Pete's YouTube channel in the description as well. So probably we're sort of at the hour and 23-minute mark. Time's flown, and so it's probably fair to say, in wrapping up, that people need to have a plan when they practice.
Absolutely, yes.
So don't just turn up without a plan and belt balls. You'll be like the guy that broke the record and went out 4 shots. We don't want that to happen. You've got to develop some kind of feedback system.
Yep.
When you practice, and there should be an element of competitive practice during each session.
Absolutely, and in your practice, we didn't mention this earlier. Frequency is more important than quantity in practice. In other words, let's say you've got 2 golfers, and one hits 25 balls 4 times a week, and one guy hits 200 balls. So that first player is hitting a total of 100 balls a week. Now we've got one guy who hits 200 balls once a week. My money's on the first guy, who's only hitting 100 balls, but he's getting the frequency of practicing 4 times a week. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's really good. And the only other thing we didn't cover, and we probably should have, is the difference between block practice and random practice.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't necessarily understand that there is a difference, but every practice session should have an element of both. So block practice is hitting shot after shot, trying to repeat an action where you might be thinking of a technical thing. I'm going to take my club face back. I'm going to take the club slightly inside, if that's the thought. And you do that over and over and over again. But at some point during the practice session, you've got to think, well, I've got that pretty much down pat. I've got that feel going now. I know where I'm at. Then you have to put that under pressure. And that's when the random practice comes in, and what you alluded to earlier of choosing different targets, hitting one shot to the target down the left, another shot to the tree down the right.
Yep.
Can you hit the range cart that's picking up the balls, all that sort of thing. So there should be an element of both in every single practice session that you have.
Definitely. Yeah, that sort of goes back to what I was talking about, the rule of thirds. So that block practice would be sort of like the technical element where you're focused on one thing and pretty much one thing to try and repeat that, just to start to become more familiar with it. Not to embed it, not to ingrain it, because you can't do that, but just become more familiar with it, and then of course build the variety in, and then the competitive element.
So just a couple of little comments at the end. Core says Chris Ryan is good. He's up there, and I wish we had some of his numbers.
Yeah, he's Chris Ryan. Yeah, he's very good. I like the way he presents. Yeah.
Yes, and Core's disappointed that we're finished.
He's given us the sack.
He has, and he's thanking us. We've got one final one, I think, here from John. With all the golf science that is now available that was not around earlier in your teaching career, has it changed your teaching, and what things altered on your ideas? Geez, he's good. He's good with the questions,
yeah,
John.
Absolutely, massively. Golf science has explained a lot of the things that we knew empirically, in other words, through our own observations and speaking with other players and other coaches and our own experiences. But it also made us aware of things that we didn't know about. And that's where, so the combination of those things means that as coaches, we evolve over time. My ideas have certainly changed a lot over the time that I've been teaching. So just as, players pretty much have the objective of looking to play better all the time, I know Fitzy's the same. Every year we carry one goal that never ever goes away, and that's that I want to be able to coach better this year than what I did last year. And so that's, taking in information. And if we're coaching better, then we're probably coaching differently, maybe not massively. It doesn't mean that we're changing our thoughts on swing theory, although over a longer period of time, sometimes those things change as well. So yeah, as golf science, sports science has had a massive influence over time. So I've been coaching for 40 years, and I'm a very different coach now to what I was, even 20 years ago.
Well, look what it's done to you. When you started coaching, you had a full head of hair.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but when you drive home at the end of your coaching stint, do you review your own performance of how you went on that day?
Oh, absolutely. Even now, I will still give lessons where I'm not satisfied with the outcome of the lesson. It's got nothing to do with the player. It's all about me. And I'll review, what did I do? Could I have said something differently, explained something differently? Did I pick the right thing to focus on? Did I push that player to do something that was beyond their capabilities? All those sorts of things. So it's a constant. This assessment is it's ongoing, and sometimes it hurts. Like from a coaching perspective, it's like, oh my God, that person's paid for the lesson. I don't think I delivered as well as what I wanted for them. And sometimes that person will come along next time and say, you know what you told me last time's made a massive difference. That doesn't always happen, but it hurts. If I feel like I've given a lesson that wasn't, I'll say, up to scratch, I don't like it at all.
So do you get on the phone at some point or send an email and have a chat and say, if next time you're down at the range, just let me know and I'll just give you 5 minutes? Or I've just thought of another way, further to that lesson you had on Wednesday. I've been thinking about it and I just came up with something else that's going to be a bit better for you. Have you ever done that?
More like the second one. Or when they're practicing, because probably 50% of my clientele will practice where I'm coaching at Yarra Bend. So if they're practicing and I've got a gap between lessons, then I'll just sort of wander down the range. And if there's someone there that I've been coaching, I'll ask them, how are you going, and how are you going since the last lesson, even if that last lesson might have been, a year or a couple of years ago, or whether it was yesterday. Just to sort of check and see how they're going.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realise that that's what we do. They think we just grab their money, tell them something, and then see you when they book in. We actually do care, and most really good golf coaches that I know of assess. We have a plan, we have our own feedback system, and it's not always from the client. It's how we evaluate our own performance, like you should be doing when you practice. So, yeah, that's good. Well, that's probably as good a place as any to end. So thank you very much for your time tonight. I've actually learned, as well as I'm sure a lot of other people have. I think lots of people have enjoyed it. And if you're at a loose end on Friday night, this coming Friday night, I'm going to be hosting a trivia night, a golf trivia night on this platform. So keep your eye out. It'll be a bit of fun. I think I'm doing it solo. There's a slight chance I might have someone else helping me, but you'll have to put up with my dad jokes. And I'm going to make it a bit tough, because we've got to make it so that people can't just cheat and look up the answer on the internet. So that's actually a very tough challenge to do. But if you want a bit of fun for an hour or so, hop into that live stream event happening on Friday. So actually, there's one message has just came up here. Pete walking around the range gives me paranoia. Oh, he's not that bad.
Now, Jai, that's all part of the training, mate. I know, Jai.
Yeah, I thought you might. And for Peter, go and watch the footy, Peter. I'm a Richmond supporter. We're not there this year, so that's why I'm doing it. Not everyone's interested in how Melbourne goes, So I'm doing something a bit different. Anyway, thank you very much. It's been really good, and I look forward to doing one again with you soon, Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Pitchy. Thank you for
Goodbye, all. Have a great night.